Microphone check. Microphone check. Microphone check. Probably okay. I think my... Yeah, it's... And one more. There we go. Alright, well, I want to... two things. One, I want to play this game through with commentary and see what that's like. But also, I want to platinum this game as well. And platinuming this game doesn't seem too tough. I only have six trophies left to get. And this game, especially the second time through, will be a breeze. In fact, I could probably do it faster if I just blow through a bunch of shit. Well, I guess we'll see. I'm curious how this commentary thing's gonna work.
All right, Minnie. Ready to start docking sequence?
Okay. Engaging retro thrusters now.
Come down. Don't worry, I've got
Lunar
this.
Transfer Station Tacoma. Commercial cargo transit facility. Crew evacuated. Station AI offline.
Air supply?
Crew evacuated.
Breathable
I
air
see.
on Tacoma for a crew of 1 should be more than sufficient. Docking now.
How does the commentary work? I missed that before, so it said crew evacuated.
Stop.
Nice. Thanks, Minnie.
Ah, that's how.
Hey there, I'm Steve,
I'm Carla.
and we are the co-founders of Fulbright, and we want to welcome you to Tacoma's commentary mode.
Welcome.
Throughout the game, you'll find icons like this one that will give you insight from a bunch of different people that contributed to Tacoma. You know, people on the development team that did design, animation, sound, and pretty much
So doing the voice recording for Amy was definitely very different from what we did with Sam in Gone Home. A lot of it with Gone Home, since it is something that's very...
So Minnie is Amy's ship's AI. I think she's most known for saying, okay. And I am the voice of Minnie. When we originally recorded it, it was just Scratch. So we didn't know then that I would be the voice of Minnie, ultimately. But yeah, it stuck, and it was a nice surprise.
Yeah, Minnie went through like a bunch of iterations. Actually, it was kind of hard to get her right.
She barely had
We
any.
ended up kind of settling on
Barely had any
the
lines,
audio direction
anyways.
being like a happy version of Hal, like the really famous AI from 2001. So yeah, I just kind of took Noelle's really amazing VO and I would do things like I would time stretch it, or I would take one syllable and like an okay, that line. I took the...
A lot of people ask about the use of sign language in Tacoma, including asking things like, is Amy hearing impaired? Is there, you know, what is the rationale behind the use of sign language? And for us, it actually came from thinking about how an interface for a non-physical thing like AR might work.
Most of our AR interaction is, you know, it's attention-based and it's focus-based, like on where the the user is looking and paying attention to. But sometimes there are good reasons for you to do something, physically, and we use therefore sign language for things like signing in.
Or in the case of when Amy's recovering one of the AR crew records, she does, as opposed to like text entry, she does full word commands in ASL, American Sign Language.
And our editor Noel also had extensive correspondence with a person fluent in ASL, so
yeah, it was important to us to work with a sign language consultant so that Noelle could ensure that the hand motions and the finger spelling that she was animating were accurate to how someone might actually use those gestures in the real world.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Did it really seem like it was something else? Anyways, let's go to personnel and start getting this underway. Should have turned on another... should have turned on another thing while I was going down this way. So there are 2 trophies in this area I missed the first time through.
All right, so the advertisements you see in the transfer shaft are advertising the Venturis Belt vacation homes, and I got to illustrate them. They're really fun. I'm usually doing animation and stuff, so this is kind of like a fun little task.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when I was working on Tacoma, at sort of in my free time, I would just record a bunch of music, and Steve, the idea for the transfer ad kind of came online, and Steve was like, "Oh, we need a jingle for this." And
so there's actually a whole bunch of physically made paper items in Tacoma that our characters made, and in order to make those assets, Kate and I pretty much always actually made those paper objects and scanned them and whatnot to put them in,
as opposed to typing it out in Photoshop.
Yeah. I guess we carried that over from Gone Home, just kind of making things physically on paper, because it really does look a lot different.
It does, yeah. And actually, there's a little bloody handprint in the drone bay, and I spent a lot of time just getting my hands covered in ink and then just smacking them all around pieces of paper.
It's extremely
and doing
good.
Little blood spheres and stuff. I feel like now I pass this rite of passage because I put a bloody handprint in a video game.
Where was the... Oh? Lavatory.
So the whole main scene in the dining room centers on this making and unveiling of Odin's cake, which he sort of neural network together into something that he thinks that humans would kind of like to eat for this weird party he's throwing. So that's the cake in the game. It doesn't actually exist. It's just sort of implied sheet cake.
There we go.
But Sarah, for our lunch party,
there we go.
So you were responsible for actually making, reproducing the cake in real life, right?
Yes. I almost feel I think in my head that it was going to be a lot funnier than it actually was. I was very concerned about the look that I was going to get from a baker when I go in and say, "Hi, I need a basic sheet cake in gray," and then with very specific red icing. But yeah, she ended up being fantastic. I think we agreed right away that it needed to be some very clear store-bought sheet cake style, nothing super fancy, because again, you're supposed to be reproducing.
We're a cat-rich studio.
It's true.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of studios I've worked before, they're dog heavy, but this is cat intense.
Yeah. We have many a cat.
It's true.
Whatever.
In Evie's bunk, we have all 3 of the cats from the development team, which makes it sound like they worked on the game.
They did.
Okay, fair enough.
Did. Well, he would hit the keyboard from time to time.
Amazing.
But yeah, we have a framed photo of Kate's cat Tuco, who in the game plays the part of Margaret Catwood, Evie's cat. And then on the delicious cat food is my cat Delicious. And then the sweet puffy paw on that cat litter box belongs to Carla's cat Wednesday.
It's true. She's a paw model now.
The Tuco picture frame, originally when I made it, Carla, you'd asked for a picture frame model.
Yeah.
And then I had just kind of put that picture of Tuco in there as a placeholder. With the idea that eventually we would put actually something like relevant.
So Tacoma's localized just like you would expect a game to be localized in that it has subtitles. And I think the interesting part of the localization
Japanese
for Tacoma
subtitles?
is the in-world aspect where
Russian subtitles?
if you have your settings turned on to have AR overlays, then if you look at something like, for example, a magazine in a bunk, the text will appear translated into your given language as an AR overlay.
Figured
so
out
using the fictional AR technology as a way to show translations of text in the world.
Was that?
And also, like, even just like in-world signage and stuff like that.
Wait a minute.
Yep. You just like translate it directly in the world, so people don't have to be like,
Nothing.
what does that say? Let's turn on the overlay. It's just there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you're seeing digital information the way that a character in the fiction might if they were just switching their like augmented reality rigged native language to Russian or Japanese or what have you. I think that Tacoma does look really cool in other languages because if you go into the language menu and swap, you just see the whole world. Like if you're in the hub, you see the whole world change language. So I would encourage you to take a minute and try swapping the game into like Japanese and Korean and Russian and just kind of see the world transform through the character sets that come up because it's pretty neat.
There's that trophy. Punch out. We found the cat in the administration room. Here she's in the laundry room, asleep above the vents. Ah, there she is.
We have a station cat.
Well, look, a cat.
Oh, hi. This cat, who belongs to Evie, is named Margaret Catwood.
That's right. Which, you can find one of these cats in each of the main AR scenes. So the cat didn't have a name for a long time, and our rationale for that was that when you see the characters' name tags in AR, it's because the company is officially tracking them and has that information in their crew profile. And we knew that Venturis would want to know if there were creatures on the station, like a cat. So it would be tracked in the system, but, like, Venturis doesn't care what the cat's name is. It doesn't have, like, a crew file about their cat. But then near the end of development, we put in a thing that Nat had put in a list of what everybody was doing. We included the cat in that, and so...
Nat.
Right, because Nat's, like, she's a goof. And at that point, it's like, all right, well... she's going to put in the cat. She's not going to just refer to it as, like, the cat. So I just went into our Slack channel, and I was like, so what's the cat's name? And I think, like, 3 seconds later, Carla replied with just, Margaret Catwood. And I was like, done.
I think that had been in the back of my head. I actually considered naming my cat that at one point, and then I was like, no, it's perfect for this.
That's very good. But yeah, it seemed like an appropriately silly name for the station cat.
I did learn to make some shaders, some custom shaders for Tacoma. So the character's look has changed a lot since we first started working on Tacoma. The story also changed a little bit, and originally there was a character that was supposed to look glitched and corrupt compared to the main characters. And when I made that character, I worked with vertex distortion, and so they look kind of wiggly as they're moving around. And it turned out that Steve and Carla really liked that look, and so we implemented that into all the other characters' shaders. So anyway, so that's why they kind of have like a distorted look as they're walking around. And from there, a bunch of other things were added, like when they walk through another mesh or touch another mesh. Like if they're touching the table, their fingers will...
Right in this area, there are multiple instances of, if this was just video recording, there would be, complete nudity going on with Nat and Sarah in these situations. And so on the one hand, you're not directly confronted with that, but on the other hand, that means that the fact that you're kind of like being invasive in these private moments takes maybe a little bit longer to sink in.
Right. Once you figure that out, though, you're like, oh, what is this company doing?
Yeah.
And that is...
I find it interesting to give the player access to a lot of different elements of these characters' experience, including very private stuff that no one else is supposed to know, or that only they think of themselves as having access to. And the AR figures give us the ability to put the player in the room in these situations in hopefully a way that kind of walks that line of being kind of uncomfortable when you think about it, but also not being so...
prurient.
Yeah, exactly. As it would have been if you were just standing there at the time.
It's less working blue, but hopefully still emotionally resonant. Yeah, so the song in Evie's fragment here in her bunk that she sings, and the actor Don Lewis sang it for real for us, and it was awesome. Is that all there is?
Yeah, the song is used memorably in Sleep No More, which is a theater production in New York where the audience shares the space with the performers and kind of follows them around and moves through the space with them. And
half done,
that feeling of being inside of these scenes as they're happening and having the autonomy to follow different characters around and see what's happening in the events of the story from all these different angles and kind of reconstruct that as an individual was a big influence on us as far as what we wanted to do with our AR scenes. Our use of the song Is That All There Is our homage in a way to Sleep No More and their influence, and also fit the tone of where Evie is at as a character. So it all really came together for us.
Three, 1, 5. Nope. Oh, 0, 3, 1, 5. What do we even get from opening up her? Like, we don't really understand much more that she's, except she wants to be like super muscle woman, and that she like trains every single day. What was his again?
From a level design perspective, why was the actual station built with so many angles in the first place?
Basically to make an interesting shape and sightline. That was like my intention.
1407.
When I was doing the original Grey blocks, everything was pretty squished together because, we were really emphasizing like keeping the station feeling compact and, small enough to be realistic in space,
Yeah. And then the wall models themselves are like, because they're angled on top of angles, so it means that the footprint of at the base, so the floor area is actually smaller than the ceiling at the top. So sometimes I would put the final meshes in, and the top part of the wall would cut into like Clive's closet. And in level design and environment art, there's this idea of the grid being God.
Yeah.
And that whole area, like, we just totally ignored the grid, and everything is just sort of bespokely created.
Yeah. It's funny because like I think the area is still like it's cool to walk through, and Ops
is one of the wings that I think we pulled off the like feeling compact on a space
That's
station
a gift for
theme
her.
the best, because it really does feel like you're kind of in this constrained space. I mean, the gym is pretty open, but like this hallway with Clive's.
So there's a lot of QR codes in the game on various packages and communications and other things like that. And basically, I think we just chose them as a method for information storage just because they're so annoying. One of Clive's themes is kind of past glory, or, you know, glory days kind of thinking, because having a jump ship from his first job, he now looks back on that being like, those were the good old days, and he looks back on his time in college similarly, and he has a lot of fiction that is, you know, from the 60s in London. He has big photos from old-timey
London town.
Londonton, and as no one calls it.
Yeah, he I think he has a lot of nostalgia, and I think he has a lot of reminders of hopes. Well, and I think it's, you know, it's a way of depicting that he does want more for himself.
Yeah.
And so, you know, something about Tacoma in general, I think, is that it's about a lot of people who are trapped in a situation, and it's a lot of different situations. It's about people's obligations and the friction between what they want and where they are.
Do you want to talk about the pool table?
Oh, yeah. The darts.
The darts.
This dartboard had potentially more bugs than anything else in the video. I was still fixing bugs, you know, the last night before release on this. It's just, there's so many states and so many. So here we are in the lounge, my favorite place in the game.
Yeah, mine too, I think.
I can't put my finger on that. Part of it is the pillows.
Yeah. Oh, so those pillows were kind of a nightmare to make.
So Tacoma is a sci-fi game. Obviously, it takes place on a space station in the future, but also it's very much a story about the lives of these you know, people, these individuals who live here, and kind of about their everyday experience as well as the drama of the crisis that they're living through. And so, you know, the sci-fi stuff that we looked at that was really an influence on us had, at least in part, a strong focus on that kind of relatable experience of the people who are in these fictional worlds.
Yeah, there have been some really solid scenes that we could still draw from, especially in things like Alien. They have the, you know, the waking up sequence, the dinner table sequence where everyone's talking and, you know, coming from their different walks of life and relating to each other. And if we just cut it before John Hurt explodes, then everything is appropriate.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, then we have like Moon, which has long sequences of how a person could actually live their life.
And those were the kinds of things that we wanted to be able to talk about, was what are these people's lives like in a day-to-day way, so that you can kind of picture what it would be like to be here, or what it would be like to be in their situation, and kind of identify with that.
Totally.
You done yet? Oh my god.
Typically, Steve, who's the main writer, will send me a description of technical requirements for any given sort of game object, any thoughts he has about like the basic look of it. And in this case, the sync device had to feel like this, like sort of like a heavy-duty industrial object. Like he mentioned when he was talking to me initially about like early beige Apple products, kind of like the Apple II. And it couldn't have any buttons, as you will know, because the moment there's a button is the moment you as a player, you want to press that button, right? And so if we can't pay off a button, generally we don't put a button in, or we steer away from it. So that's why you won't find many or any buttons in Tacoma Station.
Yeah. In a game that uses traditional audio diaries, the shape of the space is still the shape of the story, because you go into a room and you find certain audio diaries, then you go into the next room and you find them, and so that is defining the progression of the story as you discover it. But in these AR scenes, they're multi-path, like different characters are moving all over the space in kind of a
that was an interesting part of this game.
way.
And things are happening simultaneously.
Right, there's all this overlap where, you know, two characters might be, you know, in the gym together speaking, but one of them is talking on an AR call and the other one is in the locker room, and they're having two totally separate conversations, but then that have to take the same amount of time so that when their paths connect, they can then speak to each other and then split off again. And all of that stuff required us to, A, write to the space.
Right.
So the process was that, like, Nina and Tynan blocked out these spaces and put down where all the rooms were and what spaces we had to work with first before we wrote a single word. And then we had to say, okay, you've got the locker room, the gym, cargo. And so then who is where and what are they saying and how long is it going to take Evie to walk from cargo to Clive's office, and what's he doing before she gets there? Because there is no... It doesn't matter what she's doing before he gets there because the player will never know. It's like the player can be there.
Yeah.
We have to fill in all of those spaces.
Right. He can't just sit there and wait for like the action to start happening. He has to do something. And so, and of course, when we tried to write all of this stuff out with like these parallel paths, we were totally unable to make everything match up until we physically acted out everything.
Yeah.
And did all the lines. In our game, characters keep having to deal with something called corporate loyalty, which is the most nightmarish form of like value accrual we could think of.
Yeah, I mean, we were really glad that we did commit to recording all of the main scenes ensemble style in person, because something that's really common in video game voice recording and in like animation voice recording is that you have each individual actor come in, sit in a booth, record their lines
so the actors
on their
who did
own,
the voices for
and
these
then it all
characters,
gets
they
edited
use their
together
portraits
after the fact. And we felt like because every scene in Tacoma is about these characters being face to face in these very intimate scenes, like the game is about being in the room with these characters while these moments are happening. The quality of the performance completely relied on the actors being there and being able to play off of each other's energy and be in physical proximity while these things were happening so it would come across in the game.
Yeah, in a lot of ways the whole game is conversational, and at least the scenes, and yeah, just having the actors physically present and able to talk to each other and look each other in the eye just added like immeasurably to the quality of the recording.
It was also really cool to see how excited the actors were to be able to perform their parts together in person on stage, because it's just an opportunity that I think in a lot of games and animation you just don't have the chance to be involved with, and so we really want to thank our voice coordinator Michael Surix, who arranged all of the logistics of like getting a soundstage together and getting everybody in the same place at the same time, which is not easy.
All the way down to coming up with a scheme for taping the mics to the actors' foreheads so that they would get the least amount of...
I don't remember exactly how it started, but I feel like the team colors and specifically the design of the basketball backboard were definitely left up to you. So I want to know about these backboards because I absolutely love them.
We needed ones that were basically sort of symmetrical, that you could approach a basketball hoop from both up and down. So this is just like, the most obvious approach to it, but it works, right? And if something works in a video game where you're flying around in 0G, then like maybe stick with that. Don't make it convoluted. Like don't make it any more than it needs to be.
I also tested this so much that I could make a 3-pointer from, the other side of the hub, which I don't think it's a skill I can do something else with, but I'm still.
So transfer shafts. These are the thing you either just went in or are about to, which takes you from the hub to a wing, and it's kind of internal studio speak for the process the player is going through, the player character, where they grab onto a little sled inside of this long arm that goes from the hub all the way to the wing, and
they're like his little coded communiques.
Yeah. People have tweeted like screenshots at us and called out these messages that kind of break into the player's AR interface sometimes. that are things like it should be saying AR crew member
Under main
record
table and examine.
recovered, but then it says something like death sentence suddenly,
Which
and
is a
then
surprise to some people.
goes away again. Odin doesn't know what Amy's motives are. Like, as far as he knows, she's really there to take him back to Venturis and for him to be wiped. And so we wanted him to be trying to communicate with her and say, like, no, don't do this. And so for a while, I think we talked about, like, are we going to do this through, like, audio that cuts in or, like, some new interface thing that you see in different places? And then we had that realization that there are these kind of system messages, like when you're transferring into a wing or when you're recovering an AR scene, that he could subvert those via text that Amy's already seeing and just change what the meaning is, even if it's briefly.
Well, wait
so
a minute.
yeah, I don't know how many people really are like conscious of these or how many make the connection, but I think hopefully by the end of the game you have that feeling, oh, that, you know, this was Odin all along.
Yeah, and there's a whole progression. You can see his feelings about Amy change as time goes on.
That's true. Yeah, it starts out him seeming kind of scared or panicking, and then I think by the end of the game he's starting to almost give her the benefit of the doubt or say, like, I don't have any choice but to trust you, basically.
It seems like he's starting to have a little bit of hope at the end, I think. But,
yeah.
Wow, everything seems fixed on the second run go through. Or am I just getting lucky with what there is?
So this is one question I have, because I don't remember how we got to it, but there was a lot of iteration on the design of the AR desktops, but what we settled on was kind of the horseshoe icons, which I think came from you. The horseshoe bat.
Yeah. Well, we started out with the earliest versions of it being a grid of screens almost that would pop up in front of the player's vision.
That felt kind of disorganized, so we brought things in for a short time to make it kind of like a taskbar at the bottom, which I think a lot of people are used to, which is why we went that way.
Yeah.
A lot of phones, a lot of desktops use that.
And also that wasn't using the player's visual field, really. It was just still behaving like a flat computer screen. And so, yeah, we did the strange decision of bending it into a horseshoe shape so that it could surround the center of the player, or I guess character's visual field.
Instead of having it function like an actual phone where you have to like look at it, the AR desktop takes advantage of the fact that it's actually in the world in front of you. You're not holding anything. You don't have to like look down at an object. It can just be in your peripheral vision and you can look from side to side at it.
It is partially a realistic usage scenario and partially also so that the player could actually see the world while looking at it. And yes, it makes a horseshoe bat.
Start thinking about how it is.
So this is one of the areas that you get into by using a physical key, which is only a couple of in the game. But there's a few different ways that we lock off information. There's physical keys and there's key code doors, and sometimes there's just stuff that's harder to find because of where it's placed. Because there is this hierarchy of accessibility or findability of space, we also tend to map that towards kind of the deeper or more obscure...
More ancillary. Less central.
You as a player might notice a few different references to Tina in the game. There's the screaming Tina that you might see on the specialty cocktails board in the kitchen, which you then may later discover refers to the skeleton here in Med, that you can put the skull back on the skeleton and then put the hat on the skull, and the hat is labeled Tina, which means the skeleton's name is Tina.
Missed that
but
part.
all of this Tina nonsense is a reference to our next door office mate. The office that we made Tacoma in is in an old building with thin walls, and there was a company next door to ours that we would hear this woman screaming through the wall.
So, about the visual design, I feel like a lot of the design came from, the art side.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca Mock gave us the concept art. Rebecca's a great concept artist, and she does comics as well.
Yeah, I did this
She does
area.
illustrations for editorial work. The exterior of the station was one of her designs, and basically I was very lucky because I just got to look at her work and try and replicate it, or translate it, in so much as, she's used to drawing in a 2D way and I have to translate that into this crazy 3D model. But yeah, it was definitely the biggest model I worked with and probably the most, I came back to it for the most revisions. So Carla hooked us up with a botanist and we chatted about what plants would be good to grow in the space station.
Yes.
And she was like, well, this is the sort of lighting conditions that would be good for plants, and if you're looking for something highly protein-based, then you should grow some amaranth, and she suggested all these plants that would be good in like low-level lighting, etc. And then I put a bunch of squash in there and tomatoes and stuff that wasn't at all what she suggested.
Well, the other thing though is that like we have the grow lights for them.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to grow in natural, space station light. And we also totally did take their advice with the just oxygen producers, like the snake plants and everything.
So a lot of Tacoma's character dynamics are about trust and who trusts who with what in what context, all those sorts of things. I think we see a lot of that in the botany module specifically. We see, Evie telling the crew, here's our plan and it's going to work, and then when she's in private with Clive saying, this plan isn't going to work, like, what are you thinking? And then I think that you can kind of contrast how both Andrew and Sarah trust and confide in Odin, but Sarah confides in Odin as, like, a personality, and Andrew confides in Odin with, like, his real worries, and saying, what I've said is we should just trust the company and do what they say, and then as soon as I'm alone in a room with Odin, I'm saying, how likely is it really that they're going to come pick us up? How sure should I be about this, even though I'm acting totally sure in front of everybody else?
Yeah, and Andrew doesn't quite treat Odin like a person.
Right.
But, like, yeah, he's at least confident in Odin's ability to not spill his information.
Right. He trusts Odin as a source of information.
Right.
And as, this
as an
thing.
analyst,
this thing that he can acknowledge his own uncertainty in front of, in a way that he wouldn't in front of a human.
Right,
in
like
this situation.
That sort of like, your pet doesn't care if you're wearing pants kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's that.
True. So in Tacoma, one of the interesting things we got to do with the scenes is have characters interact with the world, but the world is in a different state than it was when the characters were interacting with it. So the difference between the world that you're looking at and the world that the characters were inhabiting is hopefully visible via their actions, but not in any other way.
Right.
Yeah, here in the irrigation room, there's a good example of this where if you're watching Andrew when he's talking to Sarah, there's one point where he is walking across the room and it looks like he's holding something and it happens to be the hose that's on the ground, and you'll see the characters at the beginning walking through the hose, and then later in the scene, once he had hooked up the hose across the room, you'll see the characters step over it. So that's kind of like a good example of showing both states.
Yeah, there's some other places where you only see the aftermath, like in medical, the storage room is all messed up and the shelves are knocked down, and that's what happens at the very end of the scene. But yeah, in irrigation here, you actually get to see the before and
That
the
is
after
interesting.
and the during kind of all in one place.
Yeah, the only other one I can think of is the drone, which when it explodes, it gets tilted on its stand, and so everyone's interacting with it in slightly the wrong place.
Right, and Bert is climbing up a ladder that has fallen
been knocked
onto
over
the floor and stuff like
and
that.
Using controls that are touching things that are now covered by what's that stuff called?
Foam.
Yeah.
Good commentary.
Just say foam again like that.
Oh, foam.
And an investigator.
Perhaps I'd naturally come upon a path.
Yes.
The dirt of the
Sarah's panic attack also came late in the development of the game. I think it was actually the last AR scene that got written. Botany had originally been a much shorter sequence, and we wanted to expand it to include more characterization between Evie and Clive in the tea garden, and to give Andrew more time with Odin to kind of talk through how he was really feeling after he and Sarah split off.
And commensurately.
Right, that left
that
this
left us with
space
time, yeah.
where we knew that we wanted Sarah to meet up with Evie and Clive at the end of the scene, so she couldn't just leave. But she had to go do something. And that led us to say, what's she doing in this time gap? And, Sarah has, I think, a lot of... she takes on a lot of that responsibility of having suppressed her own outward emotion to be, taking care of the crew. She's the doctor, but also she's trying to, hold this plan together, and she has people confiding in her that
the skull,
she's kind of holding all these things, inside. And we wanted to have this moment where it's just her and Odin, and her being able to actually, externalize how hard this is for her, and have Odin help her through that in this way that shows this isn't the first time that this happened. They have this kind of familiar ritual that they go through when Sarah needs help.
Yeah, I think that personal emotional displays like this just feel a lot more engaging to us than, for example, characters screaming at each other because they've lost
Thank
patience
God.
and stuff like that. I think
Right.
that there's something about seeing what happens to a person when they're by themselves under stress, or I suppose with an AI.
Yeah.
But there's something
that
there
one?
that is it just feels like it rings true.
What the hell? How did I do that? Is that what happens when I find all the cats? Did I find all the cats between both playthroughs now? So now it's all good? Alright, we're going to engineering next. This playthrough is gonna be done pretty quick here.
So with regards to art direction, when we originally conceived of the station, we were talking about wall colors for each of the wings, and we wanted each wing to be the color of the crew member who lived in it. So, Evie's is purple, so originally the kitchen was as a nice purple color, and
the reason we made the sync device functionality be so obscured to the player was because early in development we were having trouble with progression
So
systems and keys and locks, and people getting too focused in on locks that we were setting up in the game and sort of ignoring the story to find passwords and stuff. So the sync device was sort of a solution for us to have a gating system, but one that the player didn't feel like they needed to spend all their time paying attention to, because the idea is that it's almost like a USB stick where you're downloading stuff, and that's the kind of thing that just takes time and that you don't have to pay attention to, and people generally know that who use computers know that kind of paradigm. So that was sort of the original
the original idea for why the sync device is sort of
Power cell room.
thing. It's just like downloading away. Why we're not like having you have to keep track of like every single little thing you're doing and how it affects the percentage. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's just about like you exploring the space and not having to worry about it. This crossword puzzle is sort of an intense repository of extra world building that we didn't get in anywhere else.
It's true. Well, we have a whiteboard in our office that had a bunch of different kind of like world building universe details that we had decided on at different points in development.
Yeah.
And only some of them were mentioned naturally in like emails or dialogue or whatever. So this crossword was a good place to something that players with a keen eye for game development history might
Roberta Williams.
notice when they're playing Tacoma is the presence of a character named Roberta Williams. That's Bert's full name. And you know, people have asked, is that a reference to Roberta Williams, the creator of King's Quest and co-founder of Sierra Online? And the answer is like, yeah, of course it is. I tend to enjoy when occasionally in fiction there's a fictional character that quote unquote just happens to have the same name as a real world like historical figure or famous person or whatever, like Sheriff Harry S. Truman in Twin Peaks or something like that. And so I kind of wanted to do that. And also, yeah, you know, Roberta Williams as a figure in the industry was a really Bert in fact is engaged with decorating their room in the AR fragment that's here. It's kind of an externalization of Bert's desire for something else, you know, Bert's desire to kind of branch off from.
We're gonna talk about filled animals, which
I like Nat and Bert's bunk. We tried to make each bunk feel very different from the rest. They all have a different footprint. They all have a different, you know, color and aesthetic to them, as best as we could do. But I think that Nat and Bert's bunk might be one of the more successful. They have sort of a high number of unique assets like this.
So the bounce lighting is specifically referring to the idea that when the sun comes through in some spaces and hits certain surfaces, we try to make it look like the whole room changes temperature and sometimes warms up. Most rooms that have a large pool of sunlight that moves through actually has a floating point light that's just sitting there. And that point light is one color, and it is on a timer that is linked to the angle of the sun. And when the angle of the sun hits X or Y, it warms up or cools down. And for me, and I don't know if this hit you as well, but it made it feel a lot like a plane. For me, when I'm in a plane and the plane banks or the sun setting or something has changed in the plane and the light starts coming through in a different way and you see it like go across the ceiling, and then the room temperature changes and it becomes, you know, a little golden and a little orange. And it's just this, you can be, you know, watching a movie in the back of a seat at a plane, and then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm flying through the air.
Yeah. The drone bay, the bones of it, are based on this wonderful piece of concept art we have by Rebecca Mock, who has long been one of my favorite illustrators. So I wasn't able really to hit all of the details here in our concept art for the final room, but I think, you know, we managed to get the broad strokes of it, and some of the assets like the door up at the top we had to reuse from previous versions of the station or previous areas in the station. But I think it turned out pretty cool and pretty dramatic, and I like this room a lot because it feels like a stage in how theatrical it is, how like it has that central focus of the drone itself and the raised areas and basically like actors. And you know, it was one of the final rooms I think to actually come together. But yeah, drone room, I really like it.
Was there something special about the wedding ring put back?
Originally, the way the Chivo worked is you had to pick it up and carry it all the way back to the ship, and then you had to finish the game with either it in your hand or it just kind of within the confines of the ship. So there was a tracker volume, but now
is it up there?
Just click it and it's implied that Amy like puts it in her pocket.
I see. That's cool. Yeah, I always imagined like there would be some weird wedding ring put back, like a little like cup, a wedding ring cup in Amy's ship.
You have like one of those ring holder hands. Or
yeah. Oh yeah.
The finger.
Oh god, those are
so creepy.
Yeah, so her wedding ring is supposed... Oh, there it is. Okay. Right next to the commentary thing. Oh, I can barely see it. So I think I did that one. Now I just need to find this cat in network. First Sarah recording, turn around, look on the wall. Or look on the windowsill. So up there, maybe? It said windowsill, though. Oh, this isn't her.
Not all of the AR fragments have voice clips associated with them, and not all of them are like primarily concerned with music, but this is the AR fragments are our space to put diegetic music into the game to basically hear the music that characters were listening to when these moments happened. The music element of AR fragments is a cool place to be able to involve different musicians in Tacoma. The band that Nat is listening to here, and that's in Sarah's bunk, is a band called Floating Room that are a Portland band that we discovered during the development of the game, and
I did most of the product labels in...
There's a Christmas duck in Nat's bunk, which is very jolly and lights up and sings a song, and Patrick composed the lovely song, and I kind of set it up to be interactive so you could, like, you know, click it to turn it on and off and stuff. Where did the song come from for you?
Yeah, the main thing was just to kind of get, like, you know, that classic kind of MIDI piano sound, almost like the sound like when you open greeting cards and they play those, like, obnoxious tones at you.
Christmas duck.
It's just like it's just a piano sound that I, like, really reduced and simulated sending it through a really small speaker. To kind of sell the idea that it was maybe cheaply manufactured.
Oh my god, that's so cool. Wait, so did you were playing it through like a real, like, physical tiny speaker?
Yeah, like a tiny speaker. Yeah.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
Yeah, super analog. Yeah, but I love the Christmas duck just because, I don't know, it's one of those moments that feel like really personal when the player kind of stumbles across it. At least it did for me when I was playing through and found it. So.
I come from this background, art-wise, of illustration. When I first went to school, it wasn't for games. It was for book illustration. And, you know, it's a very traditional... a lot of the tools that you work with, if you're not working with Photoshop, are literally things like paint and scratchboard and very physical media. And eventually in my career I decided I really wanted to work in games, so, you know, I moved to digital and 3D tools like Maya and ZBrush, and in this case more recently the Substance programs.
So the concept behind One Vein is that they are an augmented reality boy band, which is to say one of them is a physical person, i.e. Marcus, and the other two are
projections.
Yeah, like alternate personalities, kind of.
Like Hatsune Miku.
Much like.
But they do look like real people as opposed to...
It's true.
And network technology is a funny wing for me, because I made the gray block of it at least 3 separate times, like starting from scratch, like literally building the wing from scratch 3 separate times in gray block form, which is more than any other wing. And it was also, I think, one of the earliest wings that I worked on. Because it was one of the earliest gray blocks that I was doing, I was adding all sorts of, like, different purpose rooms to the wing originally.
When Steve asked me to voice Sergio, he didn't...
Odin's wetware is this little drawer that, with the gold handle that Amy pulls out of this pillar and takes back to her ship. And the player doesn't really get a long look at Odin during the little animation that plays. So I am including a little snapshot render of the model itself. When we first started talking about Odin's design, like not Odin the room, but Odin the actual,
cool.
This little individual piece of wetware, Carla had mentioned the shapes and forms of a Romanesco cauliflower. And in my first version of the model, I'd actually taken up an alpha or a black and white height map, essentially, of a Romanesco cauliflower and sort of pressed it into the actual model to get the shapes. But it was a bit noisy and it didn't really read as intended. It made some cool patterns, but it was also a little cluttered visually. So we did a second pass on the model, and we made him look more brain-like, more wetware-like, more organic. And in Odin 2.2, it felt more like a living piece of technology than the previous rendition had. And I remember spending a lot of time painting out the little veins and things in there. And I really like how gross it looks. This is another part of it. I tried to make it as glossy and weird as I could, so... That's Odin. He's actually, he's a handsome voice in a gross little box.
Not that gross.
We're here to talk about working together as programmers. It's interesting because it has been a while since I've worked with someone for whom this was a first game.
Yep.
And that is unusual. So I have a almost 20-year history now in games, and
I have a 3-year history in working in games now.
That's right.
Well, I was kind of thrown into the deep end when I was hired. We didn't have any other programmers, so having others come onto the project was super exciting for me.
Yeah. Yes, it's funny because you think of programmers as working in a vacuum, but the truth is I think we benefit a lot from a meetings of the minds to be able to pass on just whatever bits and bobs I could think of to pass along as I encountered things working with you.
Well, one of the things Brett really helped me with was being more aware of how I was using processing power and memory and all sorts of things, like making the stuff I was writing more efficient. And as that became more and more of a concern later down on the road, I became much more aware of I was doing this in a super unsustainable way.
Yeah, a lot of that's just, accruing experience, and the best way to pass that on is to be able to talk over it with someone. I mean, certainly I have been doing throughout my career, but that has changed over time. There's been a lot less direct mentorship later in my career because the teams are large and established, and I'm giving a lot of guidance, but not necessarily... I'm generally working with people who are more experienced, and so I don't have to pass those tidbits along, or they may have tidbits of their own that I'm then picking up as well. So anyway, that's all been kind of a terrific part of this project for me in particular.
So the cryopods here in Hub are meant to freeze the crew in case of emergency, and these pods can be seen through the cryo room window in Hub from the very beginning of the game, to not ruin the story or the mystery of whether the crew are in the pods or not. I try to make a script that would effectively make it so the glass on the cryopods is opaque and then slowly becomes transparent as you move in. However, when I was making this script, there was a fun event. The test color I used, it was a blood red. It did look like the cryopods were all filled with blood, which then kind of dissipated into a mist as you approached. This is the kind of thing you want to show your fellow teammates. And before I did that, I decided to get the skeleton model that is in medical and put one in every one of the cryopods, and then call people over and have them give it a shot. It's the kind of thing you really want to do when you're showing off a new feature.
Well, I kind of flew through it, but that might have taken care of all the The only one I haven't gotten is Ring Bearer, which hopefully will unlock when I finish this up.
Minnie, I'm back.
Okay. Ship is ready to depart. Please strap into the pilot seat.
The fun thing for us about where Tacoma ends up is that the whole game has been about Amy, who's voiced by Sarah Grayson, who did the voice of Sam in Gone Home, coming into contact finally with Odin, who's voiced by Carl Lumbly, who played Porter in Minerva's Den, and them kind of getting to be cool friends and ride off into the sunset together.
And fighting crime.
Yeah, maybe. We don't know.
They're totally fighting crime.
That's
They're fighting
true.
AI crime.
Corporate crime.
Hell yes.
Fair point. And also, I really wanted to have kind of a, like, hell yeah kind of moment at the end and be like, oh, you were there to save him and now you get to escape.
Even if what's going to go on past that point might be a little more difficult.
Right. Like, it's once, it's sort of what Odin implies in the first conversation he has with Sarah, where it's like, once the AILF actually has their hands on an AI, it's not clear if they really know what they're going to do with
it.
But, getting him out of the hands of Venturis is step one.
Yeah.
And then relying on their sovereignty as a like free orbital platform is step two, I guess, maybe, or them having to go into hiding. I don't even know.
Even though Juno is on the track of Amy in some way, and even if Amy's harder to track down than it looks, it still might be a problem.
Yeah, and
probably.
And so I think that we don't know where the stories in our games go after the end of the credits. And so I think we're really focused on, what happens within the text and the possibilities of where that could go next, and hopefully those seeming interesting. So thank you so much for playing through Tacoma with commentary mode enabled.
Played it.
Yeah. We hope that you learned some things about how the game was made and how different people on the team thought about their work than you would have otherwise, and just thank you in general for taking time to play the game.
Emily Carroll.
Nina and Tynan did a shit ton of work cutting up all of these VO files.
Yeah,
and we should thank them as well.
Thank you, Nina and Tynan, for editing these hundreds of minutes of commentary into the thing that people just played through.
Into concise, beautiful nuggets of information.
Oh, we'll see about that.
They're concise and beautiful.
A lot of them were us talking, so I don't know about beautiful necessarily.
Okay, bye.
Rodney's on there too.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Oh, Tuco, their cat died? Aww. Alright. Give me those delicious Chivos. Ring Bearer. And one more trophy. Yes, the Platinum Trophy. Not too tough. Alright. Kind of blazed through it, but that's all the trophies for this game. Time is it? Maybe I'll play some Hitman.